Welcome to Innovation in Government from the CyberSmart Summit, presented by Carahsoft. I'm your host, Francis Rose. The Office of Management and Budget's newest guidance on buying technology solutions orders agencies to buy commercial or justify why commercial solutions won't work. Former DHS Chief Information Security Officer Hemant Bedwan tells me recently the problem is often in the adoption of the products and services, not the solutions themselves. He says that especially applies in cybersecurity. On this program, you'll meet cyber leaders from government and industry that are on the front lines of defending federal government networks from attacks. My guests today lead their organizations in meeting the oversight and compliance mandates from the executive and legislative branches too. First up, the Chief Information Security Officer at the Agriculture Department, Tony Branham. Tony Branham, the Chief Information Security Officer at the Agriculture Department. Good to see you again. How is Zero Trust evolving at your agency, Tony?
Hello, Francis. Well, thanks for having me on again so soon. So we've really evolved for the last 5 to 6 years, and it's continuous. And we've purposely been at the forefront of many different things, using tools as we've done like SOC consolidation. So how do we consolidate our Security Operations Center? How do we start to consolidate all of our tools across enterprise so that we could start to implement Zero Trust at all levels? And so over the years, we continue to evolve it, continue to implement it. I think we're probably further ahead than most departments, and so we're proud about that. And I think our scorecards and metrics have shown that. As we go forward, Zero Trust has really evolved because the supply chain management, our sector risk management has become more evolved and more of a risk as we start to see like software coming out that's already compromised, or they get into the builds of some of our major software vendors, and so that really makes it. How do we evolve that so that one, we're building into our acquisition software bills of material and hardware? How do we not trust that when it first comes in? How do we do, as we always say in the cyber world, the CI/CD pipelines? Mm-hmm. How do we do this continuous, integration and detection as we're going along to build that Zero Trust, and then identifying what's the most high-risk areas we have to take care of. Mm-hmm. Focus on that, build Zero Trust around it, and then continue to do that. AI has really driven some of the stuff that we have to do because we want to give AI access to a lot of our information, automate things. Well, that's great, except sometimes I can't trust AI too much because it still has flaws in it. Mm-hmm. And so this is how we're continuing to evolve. And I see that as a big thing as we go forward, because the more we're doing, the more benefits that they see out of AI, even from a cyber perspective. We may want to use it for detection and threat hunt. Well, I have to put guardrails around that. Mm-hmm. So I can't always secure it. So it has to be one of those things where it's constant re-authentication. Mm-hmm. So really no trust at all for these new technologies.
Yeah. I ask your peers in the CISO community a lot. I might have asked you about this when you were on the TV show the last time, about the threat landscape. Something you mentioned a moment ago, though, makes me think a little differently. How's the risk landscape evolving? Is it changing over time? And how does that inform the way that you then think about how your Zero Trust strategy evolves over time? Is there a connection there?
There is a connection. I think that in the last few years, the supply chain for food has become one of the high-risk areas. In the past, we probably didn't think about it like that. But if you're going to do an attack, what would be a better place than doing supply our food? Mm-hmm. And so since agriculture is intimately involved in that, in compliance, whether it's like inspection of cattle or pork or things like that, well, we have to be able to secure that. And so this risk area is vitally important to us. How do we do that? And even how do you do grading? So if we were grading meat, for example, well, if we want to use AI and stuff to start to do this, well, that's a new risk that we had that we didn't have in the past. In the past, it may have been done by an inspector. But as they talk about automation and being able to expand USDA brand into the smaller meat producers, then that's a new risk that we didn't have. And so then we have to start looking at where are these new risks, our mission areas and agencies are introduced into the department, and how do we address that?
One thing I love about talking to you is you are very mission focused, because I'm thinking about the risk landscape from a technology perspective, and you went right to mission delivery on that, Tony.
I mean, it's all about mission delivery. And I tell our team, I said, well, how do we support the, like if we're going to do like SNAP benefits, how do we secure that pipeline to make sure that, the EBTs are actually secure, or if we're doing, the meat inspection. So anything that we're doing, ultimately it's in support of the mission and the farmers.
Do you take a similar approach that the military takes? There's a lot of discussion in the military about computing and technology and security at the edge. And I wonder if you take a similar approach, given that you have installations all over the country, a bunch of different types of presences, the different bureaus performing different mission delivery, going for different mission outcomes. Does that kind of tip of the spear analogy apply in a situation like USDA?
It does, because we are so broad and we have devices, IoT devices everywhere that you can imagine. It could be on a farm doing like surveillance, for example. So we have to figure out how to secure that. And even if it is offline, once it connects into like upload data, how do we secure that? And so we're looking at how do we implement zero trust at the edges as well, so that when it does come back into our environment, how do we trust it?
Yeah.
And so we start with no trust, but then we figure out how do we start to trust it to allow it in.
How have you gotten away from the idea of a compliance mentality with zero trust, that we do these certain things and we're fine? I know that compliance versus actual security is something that you have been pretty adamant about.
I have. To me, that's a checklist at a point in time, but how do we actually use it? And some of the technology and the mission needs is changing so quick now that we're actually starting to have to take a little bit more risk. Like AI just is a risk in itself. But as we see these new things that we want to do, then how do we adjust? So one, that it's just not compliance, but then what is really a risk-based decision? And so we can't always be 100% secure. If we was 100% secure, then would be no mission delivery.
Right.
And so it's that, balance that we have to do.
Yeah. What have you found to be successful in understanding enough about the mission of each organization to be able to give them that balance between perfect security, which is nobody can do anything, and functionality?
Like in the last 6 months, we've had some major initiatives where we had to get them out quick. And we've done the missionaries, in conjunction with the missionaries, we worked with them to turn around ATOs very quickly. And so we had to balance the mission drivers that they had to get these solutions out in a timely manner. And so we look at what is that risk? How can we accept it? Is it low, medium, high? So these are sort of the factors we're looking at. And then if it is really something we're concerned about, then how do we mitigate it? What are those guardrails that we can put in place? And so we're balancing that now within the department. We have a good set of what we call ACISOs in each of the mission areas. And so my team works closely with them on the risk management framework to say, how are you implementing this, and how does it really meet your specific needs that you have in that mission space?
Garrett Lees, Regional Vice President for Public Sector Sales at Broadcom. It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
You bet.
A lot of talk about AI as a force multiplier in the cyber realm. What are the pluses and minuses, pros and cons of what AI is doing from a force multiplier perspective in your view?
Certainly offers a lot. AI offers a lot to enhance what any given security practitioner is doing. And it's necessary because the enemy has it too. So it is a cat and mouse game escalated. This is an escalation of the cyber war. AI can turn defenders into super defenders, and what I mean by that is picture a SOC analyst. They work through their day going down data and telemetry that comes in from their networks, from their endpoints, from their data environment, and they have to make sense of it. They have to determine, does this traffic represent malicious activity, or does this traffic represent benign activity, or maybe somewhere in between? Interpret that, interrupt a threat in progress, and then the fun part of summarizing and documenting what's just occurred. Now, these investigations aren't done in a minute or two. These can stretch weeks even. These campaigns that the SOC analysts have to conduct. When they go through that, there is a tremendous opportunity to add speed and decision advantage by using AI. Bringing together cross-domain collaboration from what you see in the data environment and from the endpoint, and correlating data sets like this to be able to identify, interrupt, to be able to then ultimately summarize what's occurred interpreting how do we adapt our security measures going forward in light of what we've just seen. That can help analysts cover a lot more ground, having that level of data availability, interpretation, summarization, the after report. I mean, think the police reports that in action films at the end when they have to do the unfun part of documenting all of the action. The same thing happens for security analysts, and putting all that together in a meaningful way so that the organization can learn from what they've seen. AI offers tremendous advantages. It also offers risk. So risk that the AI itself is an attack surface that's been introduced. There's a risk on the data of training these models on sensitive information that could be leaked back out to users who shouldn't be able to access that information. Mm-hmm. So data governance becomes important. But AI, and I mentioned this I think last time we chatted, it certainly holds true that AI doesn't create necessarily new risk, it amplifies existing risk. And that is absolutely the case here too.
If that's the case, is AI sufficiently then enough of a force multiplier for defenders that it gives them a little bit more of an edge than they've had in the past at dealing with the offensive cyber capabilities that the bad guys have? Closing that loop, sure. Closing that delta, I guess.
It's necessary. It's going to be more and more necessary. And as more data is produced by our environments, that's more data to go through. AI is very good at that. We can also automate tasks that are repetitive. We can filter through and string together correlations of information to get predictive about what we're seeing. What we see in the network and what we see in the endpoint, and what we see in the data, bringing all of that context together across domain so that analysts can make good decisions about what they're seeing, and in some cases rely on AI to make decisions, is how we'll stay ahead of advanced adversaries.
So you used the term at the beginning of this conversation, the enemy has it too.
Yes.
What's the implication of that for the risk vector that you talked about a second ago?
Yeah, the risk is it was once the domain of high value targets to be targeted by advanced adversaries. That has definitely been brought down market. Small, mid-sized businesses, smaller agencies are now as much at risk as the original high-value targets. And so the democratization of malware, you don't have to be a tremendously skilled coder to come up with unique malware nowadays. There's agentic AI that can do that for you. Down to writing phishing campaigns that used to be very easy to spot are getting much more difficult to spot. And in general, the adversary is leveling up by using AI for speed in their campaigns as well. So that needs to be brought to the table in defense as well.
What are the platform implications for this too? I've seen people now on LinkedIn that are starting to get hit up by text, phishing type attacks, all kinds of things like that.
Well, probing for soft targets and credentialed access is always easier than writing unique code to go exploit and get in the hard way. That will not change. And in fact, it'll just be harder for those soft targets to differentiate, much the way the lines are blurring between what's real, genuine content in the world and what's AI. Mm-hmm. We're all going to struggle with that. Mm-hmm. And so making sure that you have governance over your data, you understand that we need to secure AI as fast as we are adopting it, which is not the case today. Mm-hmm. The pace of adoption of AI is so explosive that the pace of ensuring you have the right data governance in place to protect the sovereignty of the data that you're going to train these models with. Mm-hmm. The ingredients in software, from an SBOM perspective, what is the use of AI? As a vendor, we hear this question quite often. We have to ensure that our customers understand how we're using AI, how we're ensuring the trustworthiness and fidelity of those models is important, and that's everywhere. Mm-hmm. That needs to be taken into consideration by
We have a little less than a minute left, but you touched on something that I ask every CISO that I talk to in the federal government, which is how are you using AI to secure your enterprise, and how are you securing the AI tools that you're using in that enterprise? They're two different questions, but they're connected, I guess.
Yes, I mean, not to say that the answer is always zero trust, but in this respect, that's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that you are limiting the opportunity for an attacker to poison the data. Or access the data. It does come back to the data and the models. Those models, when you're operating them, need to be carefully controlled in terms of their access. And the trustworthiness of the AI itself given what this AI has access to, and given how it's been operated, can I trust it? Much the same way you govern zero trust access to any other system, you have to do likewise with the AI.
Chris Usserman is Global Public Sector CTO at Infoblox. Chris, welcome. It's great to have you here. A lot of discussion based on what's going on in the news about offensive cyber threat capabilities. As things continue to evolve, how are you seeing what federal government organizations are doing and what other organizations are doing in not only taking on offensive cyber capabilities, but in defending themselves with those applications that they're using?
It's great to be here. It's interesting from the perspective of your question because a lot of organizations are still trying to figure out the realm of possible in AI for their own purposes and their own efficiencies and operation. The threat actors aren't concerned or motivated by those same objectives, right? They're reaching and running far and fast. And that's a challenge for organizations that are trying to defend against that, is the idea around how do I defend against a threat that I don't yet understand? How do I characterize what that looks like? And then, apply governance and policy to that at the pace of government and industry that runs a little faster. But it comes down to the aspect that threat actors are doing a lot of novel technologies and novel techniques leveraging AI in ways that we haven't yet fully understand.
Mm-hmm. You use the term pace of government, and that's, I think, a very appropriate term, especially given your background on both sides of that equation. Mm-hmm. What is open, what's available to government to help them speed that pace, but still maintain the parameters, privacy, and other governance issues that differentiate government from the private sector, and especially that differentiate government and private sector from the bad guys?
Well, the key to all that is visibility. At the end of the day, AI is an application. It's just a super powerful application. And it can act autonomously just as users do on their own network. So, the critical components of that is visibility. Do you have visibility into what's happening on your network, within your network? Some of the marketing literature, the marketing terms that come out are around things like zero trust, right? But in principle, practical zero trust requires you to have that visibility of everything happening within the organization. It's interesting, I hear a lot of organizations when there's a general question around, are you adopting AI within your environment? And people raise their hand and then they say, well, we're considering how that looks and what that looks like, except it's already there. It's in your Office applications, it's in your Adobe applications, it's already built into your browsers. Your users are already figuring out how to do things a little bit better, faster, quicker. It's already there. It's built in trusted apps. How do you defend against that? The most critical thing that I think about from that perspective is the phrase living off the land. Mm-hmm. I don't need, as a threat actor, I don't need to necessarily come in and exploit every element of your network. I can come in and use your tools against you. So if you've got an LLM that is understanding your network and your data and your applications, I can just ask it, go find the good stuff, get it for me, and then I'll take it out the front door. So it's visibility is critical in network behavior, network traffic, network understanding, all of it.
What does that mean then? What is the implication of all of that for the fact that the federal government is pushing its organizations as quickly as it possibly can toward using commercial solutions for things? It strikes me that that takes a lot of the control out of the hands of government security practitioners to know what they have to defend and what they have to defend against. Is that a fair read on my part?
Yes and no. So I do a lot of international work with our Five Eyes partners and such, and one of the intelligence agencies that I had recently met with actually said, we, government agency X, right, are getting out of the way of things that the industry can do and can do better. it's up to the government to define what the requirements are. Let industry do what industry does best. Run fast, run hard, develop strong. You know, a lot of people are talking about some news that came out yesterday, April 8th, related to an advanced model that has some serious implications in cybersecurity. The nice thing about that is that the awareness is there. The unfortunate thing is that they assume they're the only ones. Our threat actors likely have similar capabilities or are very closely behind. So for the government needs to understand what the realm of possible is, using the intelligence community's knowledge of things, and use that to help inform the security apparatus. What are the requirements that industry needs to adhere to for best practices that the government can then adopt, and critical infrastructure?
How do you advise government practitioners to keep up with what the realm of the possible is, given that it changes as quickly as it does?
That's a really good question, because I spend hours reading, because that's my job.
Right.
That's
kind of what I'm getting at. This is a full-time job for someone like you.
Yes.
How does somebody in government do it? How do you do it?
Well, fortunately, we have bodies that are out there that, and I don't mean people, organizations within government that are designed to do this. CISA has, you know, some AI savvy, you know, teams that are designed to look at this. NIST, others are. The biggest aspect of it, and all of the different OCIOs are all plugged into these organizations, getting that information out. But also for those organizations to partner closely with not just the leaders of the pack in like OpenAI and others, right? But also with the other components of the organization's private entities, right? The cybersecurity community that's actually seeing what's happening on the other side of the fence to understand how do we steer and protect the government information.
Kevin Walsh is Director of IT and Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office. Great to have you here as always. How are you seeing organizations across government, as you do the work that you do, implementing artificial intelligence for their overall cybersecurity protections, and how are you seeing them work towards securing the AI tools that they're using, not just for cyber, but for all aspects of operation across the agencies?
There's a lot to unpack there, Francis.
I know.
So, man, as is typically the case with the government, you see some folks who are jumping on early, the early adopters, or the ones who are really, you know, it's part of their day-to-day, right? There are others who are lagging, not quite where we would hope they would be, and you see this not only with cybersecurity, but you know, just AI adoption in general. And some of this is just the challenge of government. We have a lot of IT. You know, one of the things I talk about often is legacy IT. There's a lot of really old technology in the government. That's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because government has these great use cases of lots and lots of data, right? Lots of places where AI would be a perfect, you know, vector for improving government operations, which is cool. But, man, how the government is improving with AI and cyber is going to be a challenge for us. The government typically reacts very, very slowly, you know, glacial pace, you could almost say. AI, you really can't do that, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. We saw a report from Anthropic a few weeks back talking about how China used AI agents to conduct massive attacks. It's hard, as any individual analyst in cybersecurity might know, to defeat 1,000 attacks a second, right? We want to keep human in the loop, but at some point we need our AI to work for the defense as well as the attack. The bad guys are using it, so we've got to level up. We've got to bring our game to the next level, and we've really got to use AI to empower our defenders and our defense, because it's here, and we're facing it. Not when are we going to face it, but we're facing it day after day, minute after minute, second after second.
What have the early adopters done well that the later adopters could glom onto and learn from?
And man, I love the angle you're approaching that, because learning from others in government is something that I love to see, right? We have the CIO Council, the CISO Council. We have plenty of venues, even just picking up the phone and calling your friend at another agency and saying, hey, I'm wrestling with this. Mm-hmm. That could really allow us to get better faster, because that's what this is all about. Where the best and brightest are using AI, I think, is incident response, incident detection. You can almost go through the NIST cybersecurity framework. So identifying it, figuring out, hey, we're facing a storm of needles. Which ones are true threats? Which ones are not? Protect, you can use AI proactively, right? AI is great at identifying vulnerabilities. Okay, let's run it internally and figure out where are the holes we need to patch. Detect, we talked about finding those needles. Mm-hmm. Respond, I talked about it a minute ago, playing whack-a-mole with bad guy attacks. If you're facing 1,000 attacks a second, that's going to be hard for any one person to handle. If you have AI empowering you and saying, we've got these 9,000 covered, the last 3 or 4 we need you to pay attention to, and say, no, that's actually somebody on a VPN that's trusted, that's okay. This one, that's worrisome, and that one, that's worrisome. Mm-hmm. So, and then recovery, figuring out, best order operations and how you can come back up from a bad incident sooner. And there's an old saying, hope for the best and plan for the worst. Mm-hmm. As an auditor, I'm always looking for documentation, for how people have put those plans into place, because increasingly with AI, it doesn't feel like if a bad breach is going to occur, but when. Mm-hmm. And so I give credit to the people who are thinking about how to bring AI into these monolithic or even fragmented organizations where it's going to be hard to do, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
How has the workforce evolved, and how would you like to see it evolve to be able to support what has to go on to do all of the things we've talked about in this conversation?
So the workforce, I think, is going to continue to be the key. We need someone thinking, AI is great at, okay, these are the clearly bad things, these are the clearly okay things. It's the things that are outside those normal bounds where we need a human to make those decisions. It's also, frankly, important to have a human in the loop when you're making ethical or legal decisions. You can't hold an AI accountable. Mm-hmm. So if an AI makes a bad decision, we can't hold them accountable. We need to hold ourselves accountable. But how the workforce has changed, we're seeing training, we're seeing people becoming more and more aware of the threats. But I think we need to get what I'll call a diligent skepticism. With the advent of deepfakes, voice imitations, I'm sure anybody could use this program right now to make a deepfake of us.
Please don't encourage people to do that.
But having a diligent skepticism, somebody saying, I understand that may be the case, but that doesn't sound right. That skepticism, which is really, really hard with AI, because 99 times out of 10, or 99 times out of 100, it's going to be legit. But catching it that 100th time is what stops you from having a breach or a, hey, pat on the back, nice job. So that diligent skepticism is what I really would love to see our workforce go for going forward.
Richard Breakirons, Director of Strategic Initiatives at Commvault. Richard, it's great to see you again. What are you seeing the organizations that are successfully navigating the cyber landscape right now in the federal government doing versus the ones that are struggling?
So the key things that I see all the time that are the leaders that are willing to understand AI as a tool. It's not going to go away, and they're embracing the fact that it has to be worked with. And they are also recognizing it's a risk. It's a change. Change always brings risk. But okay, I always talk about it in people, process, and technology. So here's the new technology. How's the impact on my business process, and how's the impact with my people? How do I help my workforce get good at it? How do I help them learn about it just for their own personal lives even too? And then from a business process perspective, and this is the part that I think they really need to focus on, is how do I ensure that I integrate a brand new technology while keeping an eye on the risk? And I think so often we, in an organization, deploy a new technology and we fire and we forget. And in new technology, you need to implement in crawl, walk, run. You need to follow up with observe, orient, decide, act. Okay, how did that first deployment go? Did it get me where I want? Okay, it did. Okay, what's the next phase? And so deployments, especially when it's a novel, when it really does have a far-reaching effect on scale and volume and velocity, you gotta approach it in steps and phases. But you can't be slow about it either, because the adversary is not going to be slow at all.
I think it's noteworthy that that list of questions that you proposed are similar questions that I imagine security people ask about other technologies that have been introduced over time. I didn't hear anything there that needed to be specific to implementation of AI.
No, and that's the point I guess I come back with. AI is a tool, and people forget that it's a tool. And what makes it a little bit unique is that it's a technology that is a virtual technology. So let's look at a hammer and an automatic nailer. So you have a framer that's used to the hammer and nail, and now you give him a pneumatic gun. You now might make him really effective and efficient with a little bit of training. It's in a physical, it's got a left and right boundary. It doesn't exceed the one house you have him on. But now you give your work staff an AI tool. And that AI tool isn't limited all of a sudden to your agency. It really has an impact. I know I did a presentation. I had to go down and defend a decision that we were going to maintain cyber control at Fort Hood at the enterprise and at the network level, and that the local post commander, the 3-star down there, said, no, I'm going to own that. I'm going to own the network. And I said, so, sir, all due respect, you can own the force that patrols that fence boundary, you can own the MPs that defend this, and you can own the forces here. But one bad decision you make on a virtual enterprise network can infect the entire army. And I said, you have to understand that dynamic. And I think that's the piece that leaders just need to embrace. Okay, it's got a lot of ramifications. Let's make sure we manage it. Again, the crawl, walk, run, the one I always love, or you can run, fall, bleed.
What is the implication for that uniqueness on what the risk framework looks like? Is it the same now as other new technologies in the past, or does that uniqueness mean that the risk landscape looks different for these organizations?
So the risk framework, that's a great question, by the way. The risk framework is very similar. So you cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. You've got a good framework. Your controls, I don't care if they're NIST, I don't care if they're based on FedRAMP, I don't care if they're CMMC. Those solid controls are not balls and chain to begin with. They are a strategic advantage. Okay, so now you introduce AI, it still has those characteristics of control, of identity management, of who gets access to what information. How much control do you give the agent? So remember, AI has an agentic. They're like an employee. How much left and right boundary do I give them? Where do I stop what they can and cannot do? Notice, quite frankly, the big argument that was going on with the Pentagon and Anthropic was over this issue. When do we say a human has to be always involved, and when is it okay to let the agent work on their behalf? And the scenario we just did with our panel today, you've got red gumballs to say don't let somebody on the flight. You've got a green gumball saying, hey, they meet the TSA standard, and then you got the yellow ones. I want the machine to go ahead and do the red and the greens, because we've got a pattern and somebody's given the AI agent the left and right. When they come up with the yellow boundary, and the example I always give is a person who's never flown and doesn't have a social security number. Well, that's a red. And you go, well, in this case, it's a baby with their mother. They're 9 months old.
Yeah.
They've never flown before, and they don't have a social security number. So these are the things I think about from an AI perspective, is making sure the framework is very similar, the architecture is similar. And the only other piece that's really different from most even virtual technologies and tools, AI can do some things of creating a hallucination, as it's described. It can create a context of its own because it thinks that's what you want. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a bad way. And so that is, we're going to have to figure that out. And it's even like with cryptology now, with the quantum coming around the way. We're going to have to figure out new algorithms.
We have about 30 seconds left. You told me before we started that you're looking for the CISO of the year. What is behind that?
Oh, well, thank you for doing that, because so Time Magazine and Commvault are looking for the CISO of the year, the hidden warriors within our modernization efforts. These are the people that are always taking the slings and arrows for when it goes wrong and not being credited for all the great work they do to protect our operational readiness. So we're looking to get nominees by June 20th, and then we're going to have them reviewed, and an announcement will be made in Time Magazine in September. So that's what this is about. We're looking for your nominations. We want the who you know from personal experience has been an outstanding CISO, or what that CISO represents to your organization is what we're looking for.
Dr. Elizabeth DeBene is Chief Information Security Officer, CISO for Loudoun County, Virginia. Ma'am, thanks so much for being here. So I caught the tail end of your onstage presentation, and I'm going to mash two things together here right off the top. Zero trust, supply chain. What's important for our viewers to take away relative to cybersecurity considerations at that intersection?
Well, I would think that it comes down to where you used to trust an individual or server, now you're trusting a process, which is zero trust. When you inject it into your supply chain by looking at the integrity of the build, so to speak, because you can look at the commit from the developer, they sign it, and so you can verify that with asymmetric encryption. You can look at the build and the integrity of the build with OIDC, and you can look at the whole package, the ingredients of the package with hashes to make sure it hasn't been, modified in any way.
Sure.
And then finally, with when you want to deploy it for your policy compliance, you want to make sure it fits in your organization correctly. You would do a binary authorization to make sure that everything comes together correctly. And I think that's the best way to inject zero trust into the supply chain, is just mathematically inject it and see how it goes.
You've been in this space for several years, and not just at the state and local level. You spent time in the private sector. You were, part of the Department of Justice, Marine Corps Systems Command. Those pieces of advice that you mentioned, Elizabeth, how have they changed over time? What's new relative to zero trust, software supply chain? What are people really leaning into?
I think it has changed from being proactive to continuous, because it used to be proactive, now it's about resilience. And so how do you stay resilient in today's world? It changes completely with AI. When you look at data classification, it is now data security posture management, looking at the operational tempo of what is going on in your network and what is going on in your supply chain. Because if there is a blip, AI would notice that blip and it would inject a fix, hopefully, or alert you either way. So it really is about changing from looking at alerts on a pop to what is a deviation in behavior.
One thing that you mentioned before cameras got rolling, leading up to this interview, was this human machine element in the cybersecurity space, the management of people, but the management of identities. How do you comport that as the leader of an IT organization?
Right. Well, I think AI brings a lot more focus onto your non-human identities. Your perimeter is kind of shot because it's now looking inside out security, so you need to look at your baseline, your behavior baseline, and how you would map that. And remember that AI is an identity, and so how do you monitor that identity? Don't forget about it, because it's still a user, and so you have to make sure that you have controls around your non-human identity, and I think AI does that very well.
One thing you've said in the past is that signature defense is dead.
Yes, because AI doesn't have a signature. It can change the signature in real time. It can error correct in real time. So there is no signature for it to find. So you have to go to behavior modification. What did the AI do that changed his behavior? That is how you would find an operational tempo anomaly if you had an issue with that.
If I'm a IT leader, if I'm a chief information security officer and I don't have your pedigree, but I'm trying to eliminate that in my enterprise, signature defense, what are maybe steps 1, 2, or 3? What should I be looking at to put in place to get that started for my organization?
Well, you would probably need to look at investing in XDR, most likely, because that's probably the best way to do it. Because signature defense, polymorphic malware it has a signature, it changes its signature, and AI is that in its nature. And so signature defense will not recognize if AI changes its signature at all. So you have to have a different way to look at how you secure your enterprise with AI in it, which comes down to the behavior baseline. You baseline what it does first, and then if you have a blip, then you can correct it that way.
Real-time defense. Talk about that phrase, what it means, and how an organization can actually get there. Does it require automation? I know I'm giving you like
Yes,
3 or 4
yes.
questions here, but real-time defense, talk about that.
Yeah, it definitely requires automation. I mean, I joke a lot of times that I'm going to give my sock to the bots, because you really have to have machines fighting machines at this stage, because AI is so fast. It is an accelerant. And so humans cannot keep up. There is no way. Human in the loop is changing to human on the loop. And I just think you have to have automation, which feeds into AI to secure your enterprise. You have to have the machines fight the machines.
If, like, at some level a breach is inevitable, how do people need to rethink cybersecurity, Dr. DeBene?
Well, breaches are always inevitable. It's not a question of when. It's a question, it'll happen, period, end of story. I would say that AI makes it easy for anybody to attack you. The skill barrier has collapsed. You can ask AI to do anything for you, and it will do it. And so somebody in their basement can now take down anything that they want to, because they can just ask AI, how would I do that? And so I really think that when you're looking at how security has changed, one, you have to invest in machines to fight machines. And your perimeter defenses, yes, your NGFWs are great, but now you have to look at your inside network, because what are they doing inside your network? And so that's why you have to go to continuous monitoring and continuously looking at your baseline behavior.
David Olszewski is Strategic Account Manager over at Forescout. David, welcome. Let's have a robust conversation here about zero trust. At least in the federal government, there's been a lot of awareness, an awareness campaign around zero trust for the past several years. We're kind of through that a little bit. What's the next frontier? What are people talking about relative to zero trust in the federal government?
Sure, it's interesting. I mean, we've been kind of involved in this for a long time. I mean, when you talk about the origin of the conversation, I can remember us back at Dreamport doing this, pitching zero trust back then. What's interesting is it started out as a kind of an always never trust, always verify, and I think we've gotten to a point now where the model had to shift, and it has to be never trust, continuously verify. You can't just assume, hey, I trusted you once, now you're good. Like I used an example earlier that if, there's a reason companies have cameras. You trust your employees, you trust that they're going to come to work every day, they're going to do what they're supposed to do, but you do have to verify that their intentions are always good. Maybe something changed, maybe they're going to try to steal something or they're going to do something. We have cameras for a reason. We have to have that kind of same approach when we come to the network.
Before we got rolling, David, you used this phrase that I find pretty fascinating: treat users like an endpoint. What do you mean by that?
And when users log in, they're usually logging into a workstation, whether they're home, at a coffee shop, in the office, in a conference room or something like that. I think being able to correlate, just like an endpoint, is is the IP address that endpoint's giving me in the location that it is that where it's supposed to be, just like a user. If a user logs in at 2 o'clock in the morning and they've never logged in at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're logged in from mainland China, and they normally live in Ashburn, Virginia,
Yeah.
and they're logging into the Carahsoft building or something, why is there a change? So I think just like an endpoint, if an IP address changes, just as if a user changes, I have to know who they are, what group are they associated with, should they be on the network that they're on. We ran into situations where you've got people that do highly important jobs, classified jobs, and when they log into a workstation, they don't want they want them to be able to communicate to just the network they need to be on for obvious reasons. And then when other users log in, if that same user's logging in and they're able to get on that same network, now there's a problem. Why is Dave allowed to get on the same network as Jim is? Maybe they shouldn't be. So I think again, you have to treat people the same way we would trust a workstation.
How is that complicated by artificial intelligence? I mean, to steal from your comparison there, what if Dave is a bot?
Yeah, no, that's kind of the double-edged sword we were talking about earlier today too, is AI has become such an interesting tool for us. I can quickly figure out who somebody is, what they're doing, where they're logged in maybe, depending on some guardrails. But if that AI model is now been asked to do something different, what am I going to be able to do that? So I think having tools that are working at the same speed as AI is important. We had earlier talked about during the panel I was on about the kind of treating it like the nuclear arms race. So if you're using AI and you're an adversary, I have to use AI because I have to be able to defend at the same speed you're attacking. And I think just like that, like if a user, for me to be able to use AI to determine user behavior is just as important as the person that's using it nefariously to say, oh, I'm actually Dave. So that's a tough game we're playing right now, I think.
One of my favorite acronyms in all of public sector information technology is SBOM. I just think it sounds exciting. Software, bill of materials, that also came up on stage. Bring our audience up to date. What was raised relative to SBOM?
So it's really about how do you treat software? Again, using the zero trust model. Why would you inherently trust software? We brought up the model of the old days of Microsoft Patch Tuesday. You inherently trusted every patch that came out because you have to. You have to patch your operating systems. Now the conversation is completely changed. Is best practices the best way to call it, or is SBOM? SBOM is what we've chosen. And to know what's inside a software is as important as knowing what's on your network. I think you have to know what companies are doing. And I'm not saying that software developers are lazy or intentionally lazy or anything like that, but sometimes there are, remnants of code that are left because they're not important, so they're left in there, and knowing that they're there is important, right? You have to know what's inside of that. And the analogy I used was, if your loading dock gets a Dell server, I open the box and I say, oh, look, that's a Dell server. What I'm really doing is I'm opening the box because I don't know that, do I trust the shipping company? Sure, they did what they were supposed to do. They picked up a box, they delivered a box. But did they damage it? I don't know that until I open the box and I look at it. Because again, I trust them, but I have to verify that it's not damaged. And then now I have to go into, do I trust what was delivered? When I put it on the shelf and I power it up, am I going to right away connect it to the network? No, because I don't trust what's inside of it. And the same thing goes with the software bill of materials. You have to know what's in software. Even if it's getting down to firmware, you have to know what's inside of it before you release it on your network.
George Kaminsky is Manager, Security Solutions Engineering over at Cisco. George, welcome. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So I just pulled you basically off stage, upstairs. Part of the conversation that you had there was about artificial intelligence, new attack vectors. Talk me through state of the art right now. What was the nature of the discussion, sir?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we pointed out was when we look at AI, leaders need to think about it from two perspectives. There's the third party perspective and the first party, and I'll define those. So when we think of third party, we think of external tools that we're using and what are permissible and non-permissible for business and for operations. We have to be very careful about what those tools are. It could be ChatGPT, Grok as examples, Perplexity, some external tool that your IT organization has no governance over. So you have to restrict and have tools in place to protect against what the users can go to and what they can connect with, and also what they can prompt. For us, we call that at Cisco AI access. So protecting the access to external third-party systems, controlling the prompts, restricting and placing additional guardrails. For example, I could go on there, I'm doing some research, I'm a research and development shop, and I think I'm doing good and I'm trying to help the organization, but I post something that's proprietary up there. Well, now that becomes part of the data set that's externally searchable. So it's a data leak point. When you think about NIST and NIST standards, they emphasize data leakage as a concern. So having software in place like AI Access or others to protect against that and control that is paramount. Second to that, we have first party. So first party is in-house tools that you're developing in-house, and they bring an entire different vulnerability set to them. The most common would be prompt injections, where I can inject and get AI to do things that perhaps shouldn't because the rules and guardrails are not in place for that. I could be dealing with poisoned data sets, poisoned LLMs, where there's malicious content in those, or they're biased in one direction to always give me a yes answer or no answer, so that's of concern. So you have to protect against those vulnerabilities. You also have to make sure that if you're dealing with plugins and third-party skills, they call them, they plug in through MCP, which is kind of like USB. It's like plugging in a new skill into the AI engine. And you need to make sure that that is protected as well, because those data sets could be compromised in some way. The MCP the actual interface for interfacing with those tools could be compromised. So protecting all of that, scanning it before running, scanning it at runtime becomes important. You also have to deal with things like hallucinations of confidence, where the AI is overconfident. If you prompt an AI and it will always give you an answer unless you tell it. If you don't know the answer, say you don't know the answer, right? So, those are some of the things that are vulnerabilities, because it'll try to conjure an answer that might not be right, and somebody might take that verbatim, which is of concern. And then I'll call it overconfident agentic AI, meaning overconfidence in agentic AI. We see that that's on the growth path. Agentic AI has a lot of benefits to it, but with that, you also need to bring additional policy and protections. You need to put more guardrails around that. You need to have an ability to audit that, to log what's happening, and to be able to roll back. It shouldn't make an incorrect choice, right?
Yeah. Flip this for me a little bit, George. Like, what capabilities are most needed in those two differentiated areas that you talked about, the third-party artificial intelligence and the first-party artificial intelligence? And what I mean by that is, if I'm building a capability from scratch, on site, it's internal and first-party, are the capabilities that I'm looking for there different from the ones where I go out to a third party and seek an AI solution off the shelf?
They are in several ways. When you're dealing with external AI, there's going to be a decision of, do I even allow the person to go there, yes or no? There's many different ways you can do that through next generation firewalls and application awareness, and just saying, hey, based on this signature, this is a request here. I'm not going to allow that particular chat application based on the signature, or AI application based on the signature that I have. You also have the ability to sort of proxy that connection, where you can look inside and look at what the prompt is. So we're going to allow the user to use this chat, but we're going to govern what they can and can't do. And if we see they're starting to type something that's outside of what we're comfortable with, we're going to provide a warning that maybe they should use an internal system instead. So you require some capability there. We call that AI access, and that allows us to look in and have those controls. It's a little bit different when you're dealing with the first party AI, because now you have to look at all those other data sets. You have to have scanners that can look at preloading before loading, runtime execution, and then what the post product is. Because you want to check, like if I have AI and it's generating code, I want to validate that code that it generated is good as well. And so we have capabilities around that in our AI defense solution, which does require that we be in between the AI so that we can look at what it's doing and again, control kind of the input and output. Because that's what you really want to know is, do I trust what the input is? Do I trust what the output is? And do I trust what the actions are that AI is going to take?
George Kaminsky of Cisco. Thanks for joining me for this Innovation in Government program presented by Carahsoft. If you missed any part of it, you can watch the show in its entirety on our website, fedgovtoday.com, or the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Good night.